I would have rather died alcoholically than been invisible and racked in fear for the rest of my life.
You were studying Bruce Lee and you had your own Bruce Lee moment.
I was in a blackout drunk. I don't remember any of this.
Right.
I don't remember any of it. So I turned around, hey, come over here. He said, turn around, put your hands up. And I turned around, and as Herb was shutting the door, all he heard was, whoa. What if I trip on the way there? I get it. If you fall down, it's embarrassing. Then you get up. And it's fun. It's okay. I see that in my kids sometimes. They have all these worries. I don't know if it comes from me or if it's in them innately. But those are all the things that I worried about. What if I look like an idiot? What if I come across as being stupid?
Welcome back to the Seano Show. I'm your host, Seano McFarlane. This brother needs no introduction, but I'm just going to say, as far as I'm concerned, one of the greatest actors of our generation. Goonies, No Country for Old Men, American Gangster. I can just keep going on and on. Milk. He has a book out that for anybody in recovery, anybody looking for resilience, anybody looking for a human being that understands kindness and respect and, being accountable, fucking read this right fucking now. It's amazing you're still alive to write it. And you're my brother and my friend, my confidant. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, man.
Welcome.
Thank you for that introduction. That was nice. That was a nice introduction.
Right? Yeah.
That was really nice.
It was nice?
It was really nice. With this book coming out, first of all, I'll tell you right now, I write a daily gratitude list, which
Yeah, they're
I've sent you
incredible.
a couple. And the first thing I wrote, I was outside during your meeting, and I didn't want to bombard the meeting because I know people are sharing, and then you come in and it gets distracted, but whatever. And the first thing I wrote in the beginning of this gratitude list that I usually write at night is sitting outside of a meeting right now, waiting to go in and do a podcast with someone I love. Just hanging out on the street right now, comfortably and marveling at being 57 and content. I'm not always content, but that moment I was. Moment I was.
That's beautiful. I love you too, man. And I really appreciate you're a busy guy. But God's timing said, let's make this shit happen.
I'm happy to be here. I'm really happy to be here. And I kind of put you on the spot, and I know how you felt, which I think probably was unconsciously on purpose, even though it was unconscious or subconscious, where I kind of go like, everybody has a fucking podcast now, and everybody's friend has podcasts, everybody's kids have podcasts. And like I don't want to, I've done my stint. Yeah. I did my tour, and you want a podcast to feel, you don't want it to be too formal and too, you know what I mean? Oh, it's like, this is really important and you should do this one and you shouldn't do this one, but you can't do all of them. But when you left me that voice memo today, I started laughing. It was superhuman. It was raw. You poked at me a couple of times. I get what you're saying, that I'm fucking meaningless or some shit. By the way, I'm not fucking meaningless. And I just enjoyed the humanity of your voice memo, and it made me smile and laugh, and it made me want to do this right away. Not that you lived up to something that I require. I just am 57 and I have less and less and less patience and time for things that don't fully resonate and sing.
That. I love that about you. All right, why'd you write the book?
I don't, I kind of talked about this the other day. I've always written, I think I have, I don't know, now it's like, I don't write in a journal so much. I do this daily gratitude list, but I think I've filled probably 90 journals, and I have them all still. I have them in big clear bins. And I've always written. It's just been the way that I'm able to clarify thoughts that are kind of chaotic in my own brain. I need to manifest them in some way. And like you could say, oh, well, that's why you're an actor. And I go, yeah, I think the acting is more about confronting my own fear of revealing myself. Whereas this is a safe place. This is a piece of paper that's not challenging me. It's just me it's me getting it out and being able to simplify it. And So I've written since I was probably 8 or 9, and poetry was something that kind of popped up in my early teens. I don't know where from, but I started writing in kind of poetry form. And then I started writing, later on award ceremonies, and people say, we want to give you this award. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'd write my own speech, and they'd go, oh, fuck, you can write, like you're funny or this or that. And then people started asking me to write their speeches. And then I became like the go-to guy to write everybody's speeches. And then Instagram happened, and I was like one of the last people to get on Instagram, and I started writing little missives off the top of my head. It'd take 5 minutes to write, and then people start focusing. Then Brolin book and all this stuff. So I think it was a very innocent, any platform I could find to write, I would take advantage of. I loved Instagram because it was like, I'm not going to use this to kind of make myself look like something I'm not. I'm going to use this to be even more raw and more honest, and then see what happens. It was almost like a challenge, but in the opposite way. And then I'm helping people write their books. I'm writing forwards of books. And then I'm like, who the fuck am I? I'm like that guy who's saying he's a writer and everybody's perceiving as a writer, and I don't have a fucking book. Just go write a book. Validate yourself to yourself, not to anybody else, to yourself. And I think the book kind of dictated what it wanted to be. And the only thing other than wanting to structure and be a good technical writer was to be authentic. And I think I pulled it off.
Yeah, you pulled it off. Okay, we're gonna get into the book in a second. Did you write that? One of the things I was like, when I was at the Music Cares event for Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And you came on and did that. Did you write that?
Yeah.
That blew me away. That was like, holy shit, man.
It's funny. It means a lot to me when somebody says they've read the book, or they come and there's specific things that they've reacted to, or a speech that they've heard. I don't know why, but it affects me a lot more than when somebody says, not a lot more, but I still am affected by it when somebody says, hey, I saw you in Milk and I thought you were great. Because that's more of a collective thing. It's like, oh, you liked me, but you also like the filmmaking. You also like the way it was edited. You also like, the writing is you. It's nakedly you.
What did Allen Ginsberg teach you?
I have a great, oh shit, man. So I was in Rochester, New York. There was a place called Jazzberries that existed for a year and a half, maybe a little bit more. Ani DeFranco started there. There's like a lot of amazing, Ani DeFranco is like this great kind of folk, amazing, gnarly musician. And a lot of poets started there, and it became like a famous upstate New York place. And I was doing plays in Rochester, New York with Anthony Zerbe, and I would read my poetry at Jazzberries. A few of us would. And Allen Ginsberg came to town, and I had this intensive with Allen Ginsberg, who to me was, as I wrote it down, lost in the black soup of his past. He could only talk about Kerouac. He could only talk about, the Beat Generation and Orlovsky and Gregory Corso and all this kind of shit. And I was like, yeah, but teach us something. You know what I mean? So there's a photograph I have at home here in Venice that is me, and I had really long hair, and I had like Indian beads and shit. And I'm looking up at him, and he's looking down at me. But I know somebody took that picture, and they gave me the picture, and I framed the picture because it looks good. Because there's a pride I have. If the reality didn't exist in the picture of what really was going on, that's a picture I would hold dear to my heart. But as a cosmetic thing, it's really cool looking. But the truth is he didn't like me at all. He just was like, he would have us do these things, put two words together. I remember a friend of mine put together Tylenol Christ, and I thought that was a really interesting pairing of words. I don't think I put together anything that Ginsberg thought was great. So it wasn't like a great love affair, you know what I mean? But I wrote a poem about him. The whole point is I wrote a poem about him, and I was in the middle of reading it at Jazzberries on stage when he walked in. And he listened to half of this poem that I wrote, basically not insulting him, but kind of like saying, well, it didn't work out with Ginsberg for me.
Do you think he didn't like you because you saw through him?
I don't know, because that's what I got, was this guy that had just kind of stopped. And he's such a genius poet. I mean, he's truly like one of the most. Howell and I had studied him and I had memorized him, and, but there was something about that moment in time, which was maybe 1990, that I just go, oh, how sad. You know what I mean? And it may have just been a moment for him. Around that same time, I saw a lecture by Edward Albee that I was blown away by. I mean, this is like one of the great, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? He wrote, some of the greatest plays ever written, one of the greatest playwrights ever to live. And I had a moment that was just like, I can't believe that I'm here and in the presence of greatness kind of thing. I wanted to feel that with Ginsberg, but I didn't.
Got it.
Even though he has the history that still blows me away to this day.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's
okay.
the reality.
I think a good place to start your journey is in your book.
Okay.
Tell them folks where you came from a little bit, because I think it'd be a good jumping off place.
All right. I won't read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because it's too long. Let's see. What did you say? It was
all those great names.
Yeah. 1981. I don't remember what day it was, but it must have been during a weekend. I was over at Jason's at the back end of the wrong side of the house in this makeshift room against the garage. It was the same room where later at 15, I made him tattoo me in Indian ink with a crude needle just above the scapula on my right shoulder. JB is all it said. Me, my moniker, my brothers, the Cito Rats, Rich Kids on LSD, RKL hadn't yet started. But it was soon to be. This was pre that. This was all of us skateboarding and surfing. This was getting a ride from Matt Mondragon's hunchback grandmother, Dee, in the blue rusted Datsun 510 wagon with all our boards, rope, and bungee cord on its roof. Dee was our geriatric mascot. She was our head cheerleader with a walker, and she gave us everything she had readily and happily, especially her time. This was the late 1970s and the early 1980s. This is when McDonald's was good for you and when hitchhiking didn't wind up with you kidnapped and kept in some underground shelter for 7 years. This was the beginning of a whole new era of angry LSD explorers spearheaded locally by us. And it was the beginning of the cocaine craze that none of us would be able to afford and all of us would steal, fight, and fuck rich old ladies for. This was the time where the guys I hung out with didn't run from cops, but instead threw full bottles of cheap gin at their windshields, which is true, by the way. This was the era of the Herb Estate, an actual house where Mike Herbert and his single drunk mother lived, a spray-painted middle-class home ripped of all its bourgeoisie and replaced with our rage, a rage fueled by all the self-absorbed parents who would rather chew their respective ice than bother themselves with children. We built half pipes in their backyards and stole their cars when they were sleeping to go to the parties, to go to the parts of town where they'd sell us cases of beer for 10 cents on the dollar. This was before the heroin epidemic and back when Led Zeppelin was considered as punk as anyone willing not to show up at fucking Woodstock. Sid Vicious was a hero and so was Darby Crash. Inside our destructive membrane was Foolish Mortal, Herb, Dead Ted, No Hands Dan, Bomber, Bohawk, Wilmo, T-Roll, the other JB, Twisty Mole, Moz, Friend of Fat Chick, Hydro, Scott Doobie, T-Shaver, Hawk Zane, Wookie Man, Chester the Molester, Dorbo, Galen, Horms, Car Ride Rick, Shark B, Razor Lips, and Felcher, to name a few. Then there was the bottle shop parking lot on Coast Village Road where we spent all our time and got arrested more often than not. These were the years when we'd sneak out of town, hop in a van, and end up at Godzilla's in the San Fernando Valley, 90 miles away, scared, bloodied, willing, and smiling. The trips were well worth the introduction into a movement that was as close in feeling that was as close in feeling to cleaning a wolf's cage at 7 years old as I'd known since. And compared to everything else around us, it was the best thing going on. Sorry for the trip. For the trippings. Yeah. By the way, there's guys like Scott Doobie, Hydro, Chester the Molester. I still don't know his real name. Horms. Yeah, I do. Car Ride Rick. I don't. I mean, there's several guys names I never knew. I never knew their real names, and I knew them my whole childhood. No Hands Dan was Danny Inez, who had no hands. He had just one little finger. He was born without any hands, and one of the best fighters I ever knew in my life. And he lives right down the street from where I just bought a house, and I'm rebuilding a house.
Very few books put me right there. I'm right there. I know these guys.
Oh yeah, you do.
I know these guys.
Of course you do.
I know these guys. Tell folks where you grew up that they don't know the reference.
The reference is I grew up I was like, I won't go into a long trajectory, but I was born in LA. I left LA when I was 5. My mom, who was from Texas, she was from Corpus Christi, Texas. She moved here when she was 19 years old. She got on a plane. I found out later that she was married for like 6 months in Texas before she left. Got that annulled, I guess, or her parents did. Got here, ended up in Hollywood. The first people she met before he became famous was Clint Eastwood and Maggie Eastwood. So they kind of put her under their wings. And she started running with a group in Hollywood. She started kind of sleeping with married men and coming from a Southern Baptist upbringing, kind of, threw her this, what I call chaotic vortex of what she flew into here in Hollywood. And even then, and then she ended up taking a bunch of pills and getting in the car and driving and just hitting parked cars. So the men with the white coats came, they took her to Camarillo State Hospital, and she was in Camarillo State Hospital being evaluated for 3.5 weeks. Clint and Maggie went to go pick her up, and her reaction was, I like it here. Like, I'm really enjoying myself. And she had basically taken over, kind of like McMurtry not McMurtry.
Right.
In One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, had taken over the whole place. And the doctors were even marveling because there was a woman in there that had chopped up her whole family, who hadn't spoken a word in 12 years. And my mom got her to say Candy. And I'm sure my mom got her to do that because my mom probably sat next to her and wouldn't shut the fuck up. Like, my mom talked way more than I do, and super loud. And the girl probably just gave it up. Anyway, she didn't want to leave, but she left. She was a personality. She was a character. She raised animals who had been illegally taken out of the wild. She would nurse them back to health and find the most habitable zoo or re-release them. So I grew up around wild wolves and cougars and all kinds of wild animals. Had to clean their cages at 7, 8 years old. We moved up to Paso Robles when I was 5. We lived up there until I was 11. We moved down to Santa Barbara when I was 11. I was there until I got kicked out of the house at 16, and then came back down to live on my dad's couch when I was 16. That's the trajectory.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, brother.
Budding alcoholic.
Yeah. You started hitting it really young.
Super. 11.
Yeah.
11. That's pretty young.
That's pretty young.
When I look at 11-year-olds now, like then I didn't think it was so young. When I look at they're toddlers to me in my head.
Let's talk. You were studying Bruce Lee and you had your own Bruce Lee moment.
I did. Weren't you? Yeah.
Huh?
Did I have that in here?
Huh?
Did I have that in the book?
I know a few things about you, brother.
That's fucking funny.
Right?
I did. I had probably the most embarrassing, and Mike Herb, whose house I just read about, who's sober for 25 years now, who's the first guy who should have died, for sure. One of the worst heroin addicts I've ever known in my life, 3 gram a day, stealing this, jails, that. And he's sober, and he's still one of my closest friends, but he tells the story of, I was 19, I left the Hard Rock Cafe on my motorcycle. I had a Softail 1987 Harley at that point. That was the beginning of Harleys, not the beginning of my motorcycle riding. I have a motorcycle obsession. I still do. And I left the Hard Rock Cafe, I guess, with a girl on the back of my bike. Later, I asked, was there a girl on the back of my bike? When he said, yeah, I saw you show up because the fucking Harley's so loud and all that. I saw you show up. I said, well, where's the girl? He said, what girl? What girl do you keep talking about? So I don't know to this day, and I'm not proud of it. I don't know where that girl went from A to B, right? I don't know if she got off and she realized I was drunk, or I don't know. I still don't know. It kills me. It's still like have nightmares about it. So I showed up. I asked him, I want to go get some drugs or whatever. And he said, go home. It's too late. It was probably 2 a.m. His mom was drunk in there, Miss Herb. And there was a whole thing and there was a row and I punched him and he split his lip and somebody called the cops in the apartment complex. Anyway, as I was dealing with him, I heard the cops come in to the gate. And I turned around and I had been competing in martial arts and
really, you were serious about your martial arts back then?
I was serious about it. I wasn't just based on Bruce Lee movies, but highly influenced by Bruce Lee movies. And by the way, I was in a blackout drunk. I don't remember any of this. Right. I don't remember any of it. So I turned around, hey, come over here. He said, turn around, put your hands up. And I turned around and as Herb was shutting the door, all he heard was, whoa. This is fucking ridiculous, man. 6 cops I fought. I had that stricken from my record at some point, but I don't mind talking about it. I had 6 felonies.
Facing time.
Oh yeah, real time. Like real time. And 2 of those cops went to the hospital because in the booking room, they they hogtied me, put me in the van, took me to the booking room. And then I wasn't hogtied, but I had the ankle cuffs and the handcuffs on. And I don't remember any of this, but I said to them, you cut off the circulation. Like I can't feel my feet. Just loosen up or take off the thing. And I think I was really ingratiating at that point, And finally, they took off the ankle cuffs. And the minute they took off the ankle cuffs, I attacked him again. So they kicked the shit out of me. And I woke up in my cell naked. They took my clothes as evidence. And I woke up in my cell naked, not knowing what had happened. I mean, I was bruised from head to toe. Yeah. And I didn't know what happened. And then I read on the slip, it said 6 counts of assault with a deadly weapon without firearm. I've never said that, by the way.
Oh, really?
No. Well, I've never said that. I've told stories, but I don't think I've ever said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the reality. And I was looking at time. So when I got sober the first time, I was doing it. I was serious about it, but I was 19 and I was living that thing. I had found something in alcohol, even though it never really sat well with me because we talk about the allergy and I won't get into that, but I had a reaction to alcohol right from the beginning. It just turned me into somebody else, but that somebody else, as destructive or as painful as it was, it materialized me. You know what I mean? It gave me a character. And before that, I was just racked with fear. So if I had to get up on stage, or not that I had to back then, if I had to talk to more than 3 people, I remember my knees shaking. I remember my trachea closing up. So I had a base fear that was paralyzing and debilitating. So when alcohol entered my system, I didn't care. It was like all those fears kind of melted away, and I suddenly could pontificate on all kinds of shit. I was alive. I was whole. I was, which was really strange. So when I got sober, I was doing it to stay out of jail, which I for the most part, I did some time, but the truth of the matter is like, I went back out very consciously because I felt like something was being kept from me. A personality was being kept from me, and to me, it was not worth it. I would have rather died alcoholically than been invisible and racked in fear for the rest of my life.
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah.
Goonies, let's start there.
Okay.
Obviously, your first big break.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, first big break. I had already done like 300 readings, and I'd been told I should look to do something else, that I was too green, that I didn't have any talent. People knew that my dad was an actor, so they were like, "Oh yeah, you're Brolin's son, huh? You want to be an actor? So okay, well act. Let's see what you got. Or do you want me to do a monologue, or do you want me to do?" No, that's what I thought. Thanks for coming in. I mean, I got fucked with, but I really wanted to do well at that point. I wanted to validate myself in some positive way, because it had all been negative, for as long as I could remember. Whether it was up in Paso Robles and dealing with guys up there, just kind of the gnarliness of bucolic living, and people who have nothing to do, who just fuck, especially because I was the youngest, I just get fucked with constantly. And then I moved down here, and that was just the beginning of a, whatever surf culture, Cito Rats, that was just, Dahui was the same way in the North Shore, Wolfpack with Kala, who I know really well now, was in Kauai, Bra Boys in Maruba. We were all the same group. And we all know each other now, that people who survived it, we're all fucking sober, some version of sober. Goonies happened, like it's almost like it was an accident. I walked in and did one of these readings, and I guess Spielberg was there. I didn't recognize him, but Dick Donner, and he just kept staring at me, and he said, "You might be the guy." And I was like, "I don't know what that means." Okay. And they had me back 6 times, I think.
Wow.
5 or 6 times, just to make sure. And I had never acted before, so they said, and I had made up a whole resume and all this kind of, like, I had no experience. I said on paper, I had a ton of experience in, theater that I had made up. In theaters, I had made up the Libero International Theater in Italy.
Oh yeah.
What the fuck am I talking about?
Yeah.
Like, all of it's a horse shit. But I was a good liar, so.
I bet you are.
Yeah.
The best actors are the best liars.
I think, I don't know if that's true. I still don't know if that's true or not. I think maybe it starts out that way. And then now I perceive it, not that you're asking, but I perceive it very differently now, where I go, how truthful can I be with myself? How willing am I to be as absolutely truthful as I can and somehow implement that into my work? So I feel like, especially recently, I was just talking with the guy who produced, we did, and then I'll go back to Goonies, but we did Knives Out, the third Knives Out. And it was a really great part. And it's a great fucking movie and a great script. And it's always, and I'm not just saying this, I always feel like I'm starting out. Like, I'll start picking up acting books and shit, and I'll read through them, because I feel like I'm starting all over again, and I don't have any history with this. And I really do feel like that most every time, not every time, but most every time. And I said, I want to see if I can, like, actually get into this and not worry about the dialogue. And I want to make the dialogue cellular. I want to read it 150,000 fucking times until it's literally, there could be an earthquake and I could do it. And then I want to see if I can actually reach other, you know what I mean? So the Goonies was the beginning. And I had seen Streetcar Named Desire. I had seen East of Eden, A Place in the Sun. So there were performances, James Dean, and also women, like Shelley Winter, and Montgomery Clift and James Dean and Marlon Brando, that blew my mind. They just fucking blew my mind. And they still blow my mind today. So I wanted to be like that. This wasn't like movie. It wasn't that the profession that I knew my father to be in. That wasn't as interesting to me at that point. But when I saw Brando and when I saw James Dean, I go, oh, this is about people who are obsessed with the human condition. You know what I mean? And travel through that labyrinth of an innate curiosity that just won't go away. And I identified with that because I was this lost young kid who didn't understand why I did what I did and why other people did what they did. And I was just in this kind of lost PVC pipe that I couldn't get out of.
Where'd you get your work ethic and drive from? Because it's really quite something.
I don't think it's like you and I said earlier, it was like, oh, you work really hard and I work really hard. And I think it comes from, I mean, I'm making this up right now, but I think it comes from two different, I don't think it comes from this mania of constantly running from intimacy and all this kind of stuff. I thought it might be that. I think something happens with trauma early on. Do you know what I mean? Where you become very resilient. Do you know what I mean? So I think that I'm constantly playing with this idea of myself to be resilient, but also to be as vulnerable as possible. Do you know what I mean? And within that, I find that so many moments in my day, in my life, challenge that. So it jazzes me up. So I like being in this exchange with life. It used to terrify me, and it inspires me now. And then I have this other, kind of concept or feeling that, especially as a 57-year-old guy, I just turned 57, and I'm like, time is more precious now. Like, I'm more okay with, if I'm doing something I don't want to be doing, like, I probably will just get up and go away. You know what I mean? I just don't, 57, you go, oh man, you got half a life to live. And you're like, no, like 13 years, I'll be 70. And then 10 years from then, I'll be 80, with like dribble going down my fucking pants. You know what I mean? So I want to take advantage of the time, and I want to experience not as much as I can, but whatever I choose to experience, I want to experience fully. I want to experience on a cellular level. Like my kids right now, I have a 36-year-old, a 31-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. That means I have been raising kids my entire adult life. And there's moments where I go, can I just fucking read a book? I just want to read a fucking book. I mean, I wrote this book from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's it.
That's what I'm talking about.
And I know I needed to write the book. And it wasn't like, oh, I know how I said it. It was like, oh, Instagram and this and that. And people are like, you should write a book. But the book had to be written. Like when it was decided in me to write a book, then I was going to do it. And I love the idea of like being in a cabin overlooking, maybe some wildflowers.
Oh, I love that. Where's that spot?
Where's that spot?
Where's it at?
That's where I wanted to write my book. Right. But where I wrote my book was in Jordan, in the sands, like 2.5 hours outside of Abu Dhabi, where I had my family with me all the time. And Budapest, Paso Robles, anywhere I could fucking sit for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour and a half, and get more words down on paper and then edit them later. But most of the time, the quietest time, and I have a habit of waking up now like this because it became such a habit, between 2:30 and 5 a.m. Like a lot of times I'm up. I don't want to be, but I do utilize the time well.
I know you do. Did I get this right, brother? You didn't sell it from the gate, right?
Oh, no.
I love that about it. Yeah.
No.
So tell the audience why you did that.
Well, there was one thing. I went to the desert. A friend of mine, Jay Carson, I don't know if you know, but Jay Carson is a sober dude. And he was like, hey, you should go to this place. And like, I don't know, where is that? Out by Palm Springs somewhere. And, and I didn't like it. I really didn't. Like, it just didn't fit with me like it did with him, but I started compiling stories and like from some journal writings and some stories I had written and all that. And I put together about 40 or 50 pages and I sent them out to a couple of people. And one was somebody at CAA. And then I chose a couple of lit agents that were totally had no connection with the movie industry. And I knew through CAA, like, and they were super sweet, but they go, hey man, love your writing. Super good.
Right.
And I was like, all right, they're full of shit. So they got, and it wasn't that he was full of shit because most everybody was saying that. They were like, hey, the part, and I don't even think it's in here, but the part about Chris Cornell, like, you should go further with that. And I was like, oh, that's what they want. They want the names, they want the this, they want a typical memoir. I think this is wrongly called a memoir. I think it's like, you know, memories, anecdotes, paintings, you know, whatever, how we see memories. We go back and we see it in pieces and swatches, you know. And so there was one lady, Kimberly Witherspoon at Inkwell Management, and she was, her first client decades before was Anthony Bourdain. And she said, yeah, I read your stuff. She's in New York. I fucking love her so much, man. And she goes, you can write. I go, thank you. And she goes, there's a lot of work to do. And I go, okay. And she goes, just keep writing. I go, are you taking me on? She goes, I'm not sure yet. I was like, all right, I'm already love this girl because she's fucking honest. So I loved the idea of that. And we just started writing and I started writing. But I'll tell you this one thing is that back then there were 3 parts. There was a part 1, there was a part 2 that had some shift. And then there was a part 3, which was a letter to my kids and something that I'd already written a while back. And so I did part 1, I started writing part 2, and I had this thing that I told nobody. But I was like, these are fucking, like a lot of these stories are really depressing, you know, like a lot of shit's happened. And like, you know, I got to be more like Matthew McConaughey or fucking, you know, I got to be more like, you know, I got to put some oomph in there and bring some lift and give people some hope. And I didn't tell anybody that. And I started writing and I wrote 50,000 more words.
Wow.
This was a much bigger book and probably 450 pages at one point. And she read it over and she called me and she said, part 1 is really solid right now. Like really moves well. It's clear. It's concise. It's like, she said, really good job. What the fuck happened with part 2?
Oh, wow.
And I went, what? And she said, what happened with part 2? What did you do? And I said, why would you say that? And she said, it doesn't sound like you. And I literally, like, I know I started crying. I got teared up and I teared up and I was like, wow, this woman, it goes back to this very kind of raw thing where I go, this woman sees me, like really sees me. And she said, and I said, yeah. And I told her, and she said, yeah, don't do that. Meaning, don't not be you. Just fucking write what you write. And I said, do you want me to write the whole thing over? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay. And I wrote the whole thing over.
Good for you, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if you did this on purpose or not, but I love the cover. And it's not like a sexy picture of you on your Harley. Or which, like a bad 80s
yeah, totally
hairband fucking shot
Rob
of you.
Lowe and I
like
talked about that. It's like a Rob Lowe shot.
It's a what?
It's a Rob Lowe shot.
Yeah,
Rob Lowe and I talked about that. He'd go, I do that every time.
Right. Yeah.
I want that fucking book to sell.
That, right. Right.
You know what I mean?
Did you design the cover?
I did.
Yeah, it's fucking bitching, man. It's very cool.
I did. And Joey Feldman did the cover.
Joey did?
Oh yeah.
No, I did not know that.
He's the one who compiled. I mean, we
shout out to our brother Joey
Feldman.
That's amazing. Fucking cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted, like, I chose the color. They had chosen like a tan. I chose the rust in it. You know, it was fun.
Let's go here.
Yeah.
You're sick and tired of being sick and tired moment. When did you tap out? How long ago was that?
This time around?
Yeah, this time around.
November 1st, 2013. Yeah, so 11 and a half years or something like that. It's kind of real. It starts to feel real, now. Even though I know it's what happened.
Yeah, what was the moment when you said, yeah. Because it's never just that you went to McGillicuddy's and had a few and said, I'm ready, I'm out.
No, but it's also not the worst it's ever been. You know what I mean? That's what's interesting is like this idea of a trajectory that just gets worse and worse and worse until you hit your quote unquote bottom. I don't know. I think the bottom was death for me. So I fluctuated just through different levels of pain and shame and guilt and all that kind of stuff. So, I live in a place close in Santa Barbara and it's right down the road. And that was the worst I ever was. I mean, that was truly a bottom of all bottoms. And, death was right there and all that. And I don't like thinking about that. That bothers me. When I pass that road, I look at that and I go, that was as dark as it gets. And it doesn't mean that I stopped. It just morphed into something else and which morphed into something else. But, I will say that and I almost marvel at it because there were times, where like doing No Country or doing American Gangster and, I was bad, but I was on an upward trajectory. I was somehow pulling it off, which I think is part of the insidiousness of my disease. It's like, oh no, we're not just going to give you a simple downward trajectory where it's so obvious. But toward the end, I started drinking more and more in the morning. And I started drinking, I had lots of moonshine. I don't know where I got it, but I had lots of moonshine. Maybe I just like the idea of it.
You have a lot of hobo in you, man.
I do.
You got some hobo in you.
I do. I got some hobo in me.
I fucking love that, dude.
Even when I was in Tucson, Arizona, I met the guy who came up with the hobo times. I was always fascinated with that.
I love hobo art, man.
I love hobo art.
Yeah.
I love the idea of going from place to place and like sitting around a campfire and like having
Hobos
to sleep with one eye open.
Beat poets, man. Yeah.
Seriously. So what happened was we had no intention. My grandma was on her deathbed in the hospital in Thousand Oaks. We were in Venice. My girlfriend at the time, or my girlfriend at the time was, her grandfather had just had a minor stroke in Georgia. So she was going to have to fly to him the next day and it was Halloween night. And we said, let's just go out. So we found these iridescent onesies. We had nothing on underneath them. So we had our little schlangy, whatever you could sort of see, and the VJ. And we're riding bikes down Venice Boardwalk. And I don't know, everybody must have gone to West Hollywood or something because there was nobody in Venice. And I don't know where the fuck everybody went in Venice. I was like, where is everybody? It's amazing sunset going down. We went almost to Marina del Rey, and then we started to come back, watching this incredible sunset that lasted forever. And then we went by, I think, the Venice Ale House. And I was like, before you leave, do you want to get a beer? And that's where it starts. So you have a beer and then you end up having 5. And then once you have 5 beers, you have to go to O'Brien's. And that's when O'Brien's was open. And O'Brien's was my bar because I had been kicked out. I'd been 86 out of every bar on Main Street. Finn McCool's, I was out. What is that place? Nick's or whatever it was. I'd been 86 out of all those places. And, but O'Brien's loved me. I'd get up on the bar, I'd drop my pants, I'd do whatever I'd do. And we went there and then, she had to go to the airport. I was supposed to drive her to the airport. We took the bicycles back to our house in Venice. And, she said, obviously you can't drive me, but don't leave. So she took a cab to the airport to go to her grandfather. I said, where am I going to go? It's 11 o'clock at night. It's like, I'm here, I'm home. I mean, she wasn't in the cab for 60 seconds and I was already out. And there was a hit and run at a very minor one, but at Del Taco. I got in a bar fight at O'Brien's. I went back to O'Brien's. Anyway, I woke up on the sidewalk in front of because I couldn't figure out how to get my house because I had like basically wet brain at that point, which had happened many, 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 many times. So I woke up on the sidewalk that next morning, probably at 6. I didn't know where my truck was. Got myself in the apartment, fell back to sleep. I was supposed to pick up my brother and take him to where my grandmother was. I missed that moment. My brother took the public bus down from Ojai to Thousand Oaks. I woke up when I woke up, tried to figure out where my truck was, went to O'Brien's, figured out where it was, got it, went to Thousand Oaks, and I walked into the room where my grandmother was, where the rest of my extended family was. I walked in, I was all scratched up, I was dirty, I hadn't taken a shower or anything. I walked in, they all put their heads down, and my grandmother lifted her head up, and she turned 99 years old, and she looked at me, and she was so happy to see me, and she just smiled, and something happened. I said, that's it. And really what happened was, in my mind, I thought, how dare me? This woman who doesn't have a problem with alcohol has gone through 99 years of life on life's terms. And I have everything, every opportunity in the palm of my hands, and I'm shitting on all of them. So I'm done.
Wow.
And I was done.
And you haven't had a drink since?
I have not had a drink since.
Fuck. And did you go in treatment or you did it on your own?
I didn't go in treatment because I started to look at treatments, and I knew in the back of my head, in the front of my head, very consciously, I knew I would fuck myself. I knew the vocabulary so well that I would bullshit myself right back into a drink. And I knew it. And it didn't matter where I went. I don't care how hard ass you were, because I went to a lot of hard ass places. I was in Prescott House in Prescott, Arizona for 7.5 months. I don't give a fuck, you know. If I want to do something, I'm going to do it.
Especially you.
So it gives me it gives me the incentive to have a great work ethic. But if I'm on a destructive path, you know, fuck your whole life up, and your whole families and your worlds. You know what I mean? It's like this angry kind of thing. So I called a friend of mine, Jordan, and he said, hey, do you remember that guy that you met a long time ago? I introduced you to him. His name's Mike Piccatelli. And I was like, fuck that piece of shit. And I was like, I had a dinner with Piccatelli, and I left that dinner thinking, I don't know if I've ever disliked a human being as much as that human being. And we were both still out.
Mm-hmm.
And even we were supposed to go, and he knows the story, but we were supposed to go out. I think we were asked to go to Indonesia at some point. And I said, who's going? Piccatelli's going. I said, no,
Not
thanks.
happening.
I have no interest. And he said, you know, Mike Piccatelli's sober now, and he went to this place, and it was really cool, and you should talk to him. And I was like, nah, I don't think so. Anyway, I eventually called him, and I talked to a different human being. And who he's become now is mind-blowing to me. You know, he has 2 kids now. We spend a lot of time together. I love the guy like a brother. You know, he's one of the greatest human beings ever. And talk about what this program, you know, what the program can do to a human being. And he's the prime example of it. A great power of example. So I called him, and he said he had gone to this place called the Hoffman Institute. And I was like, what's that? And I called the Hoffman Institute, and I said, hey, I'd like to come to your place. And I have 6 days sober, 5 days sober. They go, we don't take anybody with less than 30 days, and we don't deal with sobriety. We don't deal with. So I figured out a way to get them to let me in. And I got in there, and I still talk to all those people.
Do you really?
All of them. All of them.
Wow.
I
I
still
didn't know
have
this part of your story, man.
a chain. Yeah. And it was a very, very special time.
What was the big takeaway from the Hoffman?
I think, you know, they had a lot of tools and stuff like that. You know, you can but there was some spiritual aspect to Hoffman where whatever concept of God that I have materialized at that moment. And I had spent so much time praying or meditating or this or talking in fucking old English or doing everything I could to go, oh, thou, here I sit before thou, and, you know, and none of it really worked. It was all in my head. There wasn't, and I always felt that there was something there. And I still don't know what it is, but there's something godly on a spiritual plane that I feel like I connect with in a major way. I could cry when I say it. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
That in a major way that wants me to be the best person that I can be, no matter what. And it allows me to embrace discomforts that I celebrate and embracing now. That used to scare the shit out of me and I would run from before.
Can you give me an example one?
I just, a perfect example is, and I know it's a trend now and I've been reading it for a long time, are the Stoics. If you read the Stoics and you go, it's all about that. Where there's Nero who used to go and, he was the emperor and yet he used to go and dress like a pauper and go out into the street for 2 or 3 weeks and live off whatever he could beg for, a couple of bites of bread a day and truly like starve himself and become the thing that he was representing. And for me, like from an actor's point of view, you go, oh yeah, that's so Daniel Day-Lewis. From a human point of view, you go, I love that human being. I love that human being that challenged himself outside of the comfort that he was awarded in order to identify with the base level human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I get off on that shit.
I know
I don't
you do.
know why. I get super emotional about it. I don't know why. I don't know, because when people are brave enough to put themselves out there and people survive whatever their scenarios are, to me, what it comes down to is like, look, man, we're all in this together. And if you're not able to rely on your fellow man, especially in this day and age, and if you can't rely on a neighbor, and if we're all fucking extremist enemies, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
What's the point if you can't share this gift that we've been given?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very kind of at war with it. I remember my dad said that at one point. He said, I remember when you went to, he meant for work. He said, I remember when you went to war. And I basically just read every book and I put myself in every scenario that that scared me or I wanted to stay away from. I just said, I'm either going to die doing this, but I know that this is what I have to do because I'm either slow or I don't know what the deal is. And I feel the same way about community now.
Yeah, I know you do. I know you do. That's fucking beautiful, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you ever get close to relapsing the last 11 plus years?
No,
it was gone.
no.
You think it's a funny question?
It's a funny question because I want to have a story. What is relapsing? I don't like, I go back out and use, that's not going to fucking happen.
Why is it not going to happen?
I don't want to.
Why don't you want to?
This is way better.
Why? What's better about it?
Everything.
Tell me.
Everything in that, all the things that I was searching for when I was using that I found in this false creation through alcohol and drugs is realized now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Fuck yeah, I do.
I just have to work at it. The other one is a lazy fucking, you pick up a drink, you go to a bar, you have a few drinks, you become the person that you want to be, even though, by the way, it's totally different than what you think it is. Because when I look at drunks now, I go, oh man, you're saying you're going to hate yourself in the morning because you're saying all the things you shouldn't say. You're acting tough. You're doing all these things that feel powerful to you right now. And yet it's all stemming from you have no power. You haven't earned it. It's like someone being given a shitload of money. It's like, oh man, you're in business, you're in business school, and then you're starting this thing, and you somehow got involved in this, a startup company, and now you're a triple billionaire. It's like the worst fucking thing that can happen. And then you're going to spend the rest because you haven't earned it. You have to earn shit. To me,
Mm-hmm.
I have to earn shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've earned my sobriety because and I've said it a million times, but my whole thing in sobriety has been, it's my responsibility to make today better than my greatest romance of what drinking was.
Bought up right, man.
That's it.
That's it.
So it's not up to God. It's not up to God. God provided me with the platform,
Mm-hmm.
but it's up to me to do the work. And if I don't do the work, that's my problem. I feel victimized. Oh, that person took that job away from me. I don't know what it means later. So every quote unquote shitty thing that happens jazzes me up now because I go, oh, it's an opportunity. There's a lesson coming. And it doesn't mean that I don't get angry at stuff, doesn't mean that I don't get irritated at stuff. But I see life in a very different way now. I go, oh, there's a humbling I'm going to get slapped soon. I'm going to get woken up. I feel like I'm more humble and more available to learn now and learning more now than I ever have.
That's
and I'm
beautiful.
like, okay, that takes 11 and a half years. I mean, you got 38 years of sobriety. I got 11 and a half years of sobriety. Fuck, what's going to happen at 30 years?
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's 19 years from now. I was 75.
Right on.
I can't fucking wait.
Uh-huh.
Where you go, oh, so just take a walk. That's all I'm supposed to do. Whatever it is, it's all interesting to me now. And I have it to look forward to, as opposed to, why do I have to deal with myself for another day? I don't want to do that. I don't want to feel no power. I don't want to feel so much fear. I don't want to feel, when you see a little kid, you're like, hey, go ask them if, go get a fork for us. And they go, what? No. They go over there. And you have to go, hey, it's going to be okay. And I know you feel fear and it's okay. Just go ask for the fork. And that's what they'll happily give you the fork and all that. But what if I trip on the way there? I get it. If you fall down, it's embarrassing. Then you get up. And it's fun. It's okay. I see that in my kids sometimes. They have all these worries. I don't know if it comes from me or if it's in them innately, but those are all the things that I worried about. What if I look like an idiot? What if I come across as being stupid? So what?
So what?
Ultimately.
Right.
So what?
So what? You're an incredible father. You love a very deep place, man. Let's talk about the importance of ending generational trauma.
Okay.
What are you teaching your children?
How to be open.
And how do you do that?
By being a power of example.
Amen. And having a good partner.
And having a good partner.
And having a united front.
I know shit that you've been through.
Yeah.
You know shit that I've been through.
Yeah.
And it's not avoiding it. It's trying to cultivate in my children enough of a sense of self and resilience and self-reliance, not in the negative sense, but in the positive sense, to be able to confront things that you and I weren't in a position to confront because we didn't have enough of a sense of self, or we were too young. And we didn't have the protection of others. I'm definitely there to protect. But I also am very aware that I have, I talk about this sometimes. I used to have it really, really bad. But now it comes and it goes. And I have images in a nanosecond, a whole scenario of like a zoetrope. You know what a zoetrope
Sure.
is? So a zoetrope of images of the worst case scenario you can imagine happening to my kids. And it happens all of a sudden. My older kids used to say when they were younger, I'd go, oh, Jesus. And they go, oh, you had an image. And everybody kind of knew what it was. And I never talked about what it was. I said, I have these images, but I would never say what they were. I wouldn't, And now it doesn't happen as much because maybe I feel like I'm actually present in my ability to protect, but they still happen. I still have these things because I think it's because when I grew up, I grew up in a very self-absorbed family. So there was no protection. And I remember I have a younger brother and I always used, I remember looking at my parents and thinking, well, you people don't know what you're fucking doing. You're lost. So I got him. Like, I'll take care of him when I was 8 or 9. And my parents actually my dad talks about that now. He was like, oh, you were so protective of your brother and you never thought we were looking after him. I said, well, you weren't really, ultimately. So I think I have that protective thing, but I try to keep that in mind because I don't want to overcompensate because I think that's just as bad in like, oh, I can't let them do anything. I can't let them this. I let them fall. I let them try. I let them have the experiences that they need on an individual basis to grow that confidence. I try.
It's a nice Valentine's you wrote to all your family. That was beautiful.
Thanks, man.
That was beautiful, man.
I felt that. Those things just come on a whim. I don't sit there and work on those things.
I think it's what makes you such a great actor, brother, but this deep capacity for love.
That's what I've discovered.
Where did that happen?
I don't know.
Huh?
I don't know. I really truly feel this way. I go, I'm getting closer. And again, I'm not a religious person. I like churches. My daughter's name is Chapel. I like chapels, but I'm not particularly religious. But I think I'm getting closer and closer. This is what I'd like to think. I'm getting closer and closer of what God initially intended of me. It's just before all the shit got in the way. And I created a lot of that shit myself. I think that my parents had something to do with it, and yet I don't blame my parents. I think my parents were just who they were and had kids. You talk about generational trauma and how far it goes back and, reliving all this shit that's kind of stuck in our bones. And I go, I don't know if I'm a massive believer in that up until recently, because even moving to Santa Barbara, because of all, I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost 36 friends. And so in that time that was very encapsulated, the one place when we lived in LA and we knew we wanted to move out, and I go, yeah, but Santa Barbara's off limits. It's off limits. Like, I'm never going back to Santa Barbara, right? And 17 years ago, there was a moment with my ex-wife that we looked in Santa Barbara. She was like, we should look up there. And we went and looked in Santa Barbara, and we talked about, we found a house, and we were like, well, maybe this house. And I didn't really have any money, and it was kind of her doing. And in the process of possibly moving up there, I contracted Bell's palsy, right? So half of my face just kind of fell off my skull. And it was a severe case of it. And I didn't know if I was going to get my face back or not or whatever. So that was built on the stress that I felt about moving back to Santa Barbara. I got my face back. I ended up doing W with Oliver Stone, and he pushed the movie back and all this kind of stuff. It has to be you. 17 years later, out of frustration of us constantly saying we wanted to move, or where we're going to go to the East Coast, we're going to go to Europe, where we're going to go. And I took out my phone and I Zillowed Santa Barbara. And the first house that came up, I go, wow, that's a really cool house. And I called a friend of mine from Santa Barbara and I said, will you show us this house? And I went up there and we walked on the property, and it was immediately obvious. This place was like all broken down. It was Joe Walsh's old house. I loved that idea. And I said, I just walked on the property and both of us said, this is it. Like, it's undeniable. During that process, I contracted Bell's palsy again. So whenever I think that things aren't trapped in your body, and I would go, yeah, frou this, frou that, like, I get it, but it's a little dramatic for me. Now I'm a believer because I contracted,
wow,
going back to a very specific place in a very specific time in my head. I stressed myself out so dramatically that I ended up contracting Bell's palsy twice.
Wow.
In the pursuit of it.
That reminds me of the great book on trauma, The Body Keeps the Score.
There you go. I've never read it.
Yeah, it's a great title, right?
Yeah, it's an amazing title.
Right?
It's an amazing title.
But Josh, what do you have to work extra hard on from not kicking your ass and throwing you off your game?
I don't know. What do you mean by my game?
Staying so focused, staying in the light, staying in the frequency.
I get thrown off my game all the time.
What's the one that really, you got to work extra hard at, like, not letting, let's just call it the dark forces, the dark energy.
It happened today. I was down here. I have an idea for a film that I think could be really good, that there's a dearth of a certain type of person that is non-existent today, or there's a couple of actors that represent it. I could say who they are, but I won't. And I go, this fits in this storyline, a storyline that was very popular in the 70s that I think we could recreate now that could be really good. So I was down here meeting a bunch of producers, a lot of good producers, really good producers. And I didn't have a fleshed out storyline. I didn't want to, but I started to feel like I hadn't done enough work. So, and I took the wrong computer down here. So I left the whole storyline up in Santa Barbara. So I had the wrong fucking computer. So I'm having to do it from memory. And then my wife called and she said, "What do you think about this fireplace?" I was on my way to this thing, and I can't fucking find the parking lot. It's in Beverly Hills. I haven't been to Beverly Hills in like 10 years. I hate Beverly Hills. And I'm like trying to figure out how to get in the parking lot. And I'm looking around and I don't know where I am. And she's saying, "Should we put stone on the thing or like the hearth?" And that and I'm explaining to her what I think would be best. And she's not understanding, and she's drawing it and she's saying, "I'll send it to you." And I'm trying to look at my phone. Anyway, I just got stressed out. I got stressed out because I felt less than, a version of less than. I wasn't going to own up. I'm meeting these top people and I'm going to come across like a fucking dope. That's the truth.
Right. How'd you recenter yourself?
Let me think. I got off the phone with my wife in a huff. I couldn't find the elevator to go up. I was stuck in the parking lot and I started laughing. And I said, "Okay, so you're way off camber right now. It's not just your wife. It's not the finding it. It's not the leaving the thing. Like, you're way off. And how do you, I don't know, there's like I wouldn't have called it a recentering, but how do you find your center in just accepting that you're off and it's all going to be okay?" I'm not solving Fermat's last theorem right now. I'm not curing cancer right now. I'm just living my day. I'm filling my day with things that I find interesting. And if it doesn't work out, it's going to be okay.
Right on. Yeah, good for you, man.
Yeah, that's a version of it. But like, again, I could have prayed, I could have this, I could have that. And sometimes that comes up too.
And sometimes just laughing and goofing on yourself.
Sometimes that's the thing, is when I take it all too seriously, I take my parenting very seriously. I take friendships very seriously. So it's either, but when I get on myself, it's just not a good place for me to be. It's like, again, my sponsees say this, like I have one sponsee who, I write amen at the end of my lists. I don't know where it came from, but it just came and I started doing that. Maybe I'll change it. I don't know. I have a sponsee at the end of his list is something that I talk to him about, and he writes it at the end of his list and he says, "It's not about me anymore." And I love that. And I learned something from him when he started writing that, even though it came from me. That's a theme that comes up again and again and again. It's not about me anymore.
Ever.
Ever. Literally.
Yeah.
It's like, no matter what I do or self-importance that I'm imagining myself in, best case scenario in that is that I am a power of example for other people, not in any kind of arrogant way, that you can confront things and prevail. I said it to a woman who had gotten sober. She's in her 60s, and within 3 years of her sobriety, she found out she had a brain tumor. She had to have that operated on. Her husband got cancer. He's in the middle of chemo. The chemo's working. The fire came right up to their house. It obviously smoked the shit out of their house, but it didn't burn it down. They were so happy. She was so happy. She had all her mother's heirlooms and all this stuff. And then her house just got robbed yesterday and all that stuff was taken. And I left her a message. She said, "I don't feel safe down here." I said, "Come up and stay with us," and all that. And they're in their 70s and 80s or 60s and 80s. And I said this thing, and I don't know why I said it, but I said, "You're the one. You're the chosen one. You're the one who's supposed to be going through this in order to show other people that a human being can go through it. That they'll be confronted with whatever obstacles they're confronted with, but you will be the human example that it's possible." So it's almost like looking at it, whether it's a fallacy or not, looking at it in a way of like, wow, this sucks. I get it. I acknowledge it, but it's also a gift. Being in sobriety and going through hardships like you would as a parent, I'm going to show you that going through stuff is possible.
That's beautiful, man. One of the things I love about you is you're always giving back. You're always being of service. You just raised like a couple $1 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is service such a big component of your life? Why is that so important to you?
Service in a certain way is important to me because my ego can get in the way. Do you know what I mean? And that's okay sometimes, I guess. But, you know, when you really do something in order to bring a smile to somebody's face, just to bring a smile to somebody's face, it's like I challenge myself in that way. Do I really care about humanity, or am I doing this for me to make myself feel like a hero? And I like the challenge. So I try to challenge myself as much as possible. So if I'm being of service often, I'm challenging that thing as much as possible. So it's selfish ultimately to challenge myself in being in service as much as possible because I want to see if I'm the real deal or not, you know? And I really like the human exchange. I really enjoy it. It moves me. It moves you when people are seen. Probably, you talk about generational shit, probably because I felt when I was a kid that I talk about materializing. You know, I felt invisible. I remember thinking that about obesity. I have somebody in my family that deals with obesity, and I couldn't understand why they didn't have the incentive to lose the weight until I paralleled it with alcoholic problems. And I go, oh, it's what people talk about. Hey man, you should lose weight. Hey man, oh, therefore you exist. Well, if I lose the weight, what are they going to talk about? If I don't feel like I have a sense of self, and I went, oh, you know what I mean?
Big time.
So yeah, being of service is a big thing for me because I think, like I say, selfishly, I think ultimately I'm not a selfish person, because I think there's a part of me that really loves connecting. You know what I mean? And maybe that's it. It's a great way to connect. It's a great way to connect with people. I like connecting with people in the rawest way possible. Like even this, we have cameras, we have all this stuff, but ultimately there's moments in the interview where it's like all that stuff doesn't exist. And what I'll leave with is something that will well up in me as I drive away, or tomorrow as I think about it, and I go, you know what, whether that's a podcast or not, it doesn't fucking matter to me. I just got a nutrient. There was some nectar in that is going to enhance my life. And then it's up to me to be able to give it away. And however that manifests, it's a good thing. I know it's a good thing. So put yourself out there and do it. That's why it just suddenly hit me when I heard your voice memo. It tickled me so much that I wanted to do it now.
And I learn when somebody says, let's do it now, somebody like you fucking do it now. Right? You understand
Otherwise
that?
I'll disappear.
Huh?
Otherwise, I mean, it's not,
I know.
I mean, yes, I want to do it now because I'm open. Not that I'm open to doing it. I'm open to you. I can feel myself open up, and I go, this is the best time to do it because I can feel myself open up. But I also know on a very practical level that I am very busy, and that, you know, even coming down here, it's like, hey, I'd like to do this face to face. I go, like, when am I going to do that? I don't know how I can, you know.
Sobriety taught me to call you back and leave you a message.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on this, buddy.
Yeah.
A lot of people in recovery listen to the show.
Yeah. Good.
A lot of people struggling.
Yeah.
What's the message? What do you want to tell them?
Wow. You know, I've seen the trajectory of getting sober in a billion different ways. There's a guy that I know in New York that I remember I met him at a meeting, and he said the last drink he had was 2 bananas and a beer. And I thought, I've never heard of anything so disgusting in my life. And I had to know the guy. And I became friends with him. And he's called me since, completely out of his mind, saying the shittiest things you can possibly say. And I got a call from him, and he's got 33 days today. And I was very emotional. And I was so happy for him. I wasn't so pissed that he fucking called me a cocksucker and the this and the that. I was happy that he got 33 days. And, you know, it's like, we have the gift, in my mind, we have the gift, this crazy fucking totally absurd gift of a life. If you have an out, take advantage of the out, and you get to live 2 lives in one. We beat all this, the way the system's set up, we beat it. We get to experience what it's like to live crazy, this, you know, bars, drinking, all these crazy stories and all that. But it all ends in the same way, in misery. Experience the other side of it, and you get to live 2 lives. And you get to end the life not in shame and guilt and spiraling and hurting yourself and other people. So give yourself a chance.
Uh-huh.
Why not?
Why not?
It's a decision. It's a decision. You know, to me, quitting drinking is just the tip of the iceberg. You have to quit drinking in order to get what this offers. And what it offers is, to me, a very inspired, very energized, electric existence that you couldn't even imagine beforehand. So when you said, go back and, you know, have you ever gotten close to relapse? I don't even know how to respond to that. And I don't feel like I'm far away from it. I feel like relapse literally, if I wanted to drink, by the way, I would. I know me. So it is up to me to always say, if you could get away with a drink with no consequences, would you do it? No. Because if I felt that way, I would just drink.
Yeah, that's right.
I know me.
Uh-huh.
So I have cultivated my life in a way where a drink sounds about as fucking awful as eating shit.
Uh-huh. Right.
I don't want to eat anybody's turd.
Amen.
So that's how I feel about it. I like this life as it's being laid out right now, and it has nothing to do with success, and it has nothing to do with any of that. I could just as easily complain about life and having to fucking wake up at 6 a.m. with kids and have to make the lunch and have to make the breakfast, and then they don't want to go to school, and then I have to convince them to go to school, and then I have to pick them up at 12:45, and I have to pick them up at 2:00. And then it's all about them, and they will not stop talking. They literally won't stop talking. If I even start to talk to my wife, I could see all that as a negative, but I don't. It's all better than what was. And I remind myself of that often.
I love you.
I love you too, man.
It's a real blessing having you on.
Well, it's an honor being here.
Well, thank you.
It's an honor, and I do love you, and I appreciate you. And whether we help somebody or not, you helped me today.
Yeah, and you helped me. I'm always a better man in your company.
Thanks.
Godspeed, brother.
Godspeed.
The Seano Show is a production of iHeart Podcasts, hosted by me, Seano McFarlane, produced by Pod People and 28th Ave. Our lead producer is Keith Cornelick. Our executive producer is Lindsay Hoffman. Marketing lead is Ashley Weaver. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.